Kevin Tate stepped into his assigned quarters aboard the Valiant, a massive military vessel that had long passed through regular checkpoints and ventured deep into uncharted space. His first impression was that the room felt no larger than a maintenance closet. A narrow bed jutted out from the wall, and the rest of the cramped quarters consisted of bare essentials: a small desk, a chair bolted to the floor, and a single glowing screen displaying ship coordinates. He suppressed a sigh, aware he wasn't alone here. This mission was no ordinary task. It was a high-stakes operation to investigate a series of unexplained energy pulses emanating from an uncharted sector. The source could signify anything: alien technology, new forms of energy, or worse, hostile forces. As a human engineer trained to handle the unknown, Kevin had been selected for his adaptability, but he hadn't anticipated this small surprise. Sharing his living space with Lunara, an engineer from Xar-Anthos, an alien world known for its rigid, highly structured society. The soft hum of the ship barely concealed the sound of light footsteps approaching. Kevin's eyes flicked to the doorway as Lunara entered, her presence instantly altering the room's atmosphere. She was tall and elegant, her blue-tinted skin almost glowing in the low light. A mix of intrigue and weariness filled her eyes as she took in the cramped space, her gaze sweeping over the limited accommodations. Efficiently confined, she observed in a calm, resonant voice. Her accent was soft, lilting, her tone flat yet carrying a hint of disapproval. "Your species seems unusually tolerant of such close quarters." Kevin raised an eyebrow, amused despite himself. He couldn't tell if it was a critique or simply a matter-of-fact observation. "Space is limited on a ship this size," he replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Not much room for privacy when every inch is designed to serve the mission." "Understandable." Her voice was measured, controlled. "On Xar-Anthos, such arrangements would be deemed impractical. We value order and ample distance for our own," she said, her posture still impeccably straight, a testament to the formality of her culture. For a moment they stood in silence, two engineers from vastly different worlds forced into proximity. Kevin felt an inexplicable tension rise between them. Lunara's gaze lingered on him, assessing and unreadable, as though she were gauging the necessity of his presence here on this mission. "Guess it's just an oversight then, pairing us in this cozy closet." He flashed her a wide smile, attempting to break the ice. "Or maybe the captain thinks proximity is good for diplomacy." Lunara didn't react to his humor, though her posture softened slightly. "Xar-Anthans believe proximity with another species requires purpose," she replied carefully. "Sharing space without intent risks unpredictability." There it was. Kevin realized Xar-Anthan culture, a society that prized predictability, precision, and logic above all else, would see sharing quarters as a breach of personal space and structure. Here she was, far from the familiar confines of her world's pristine, systematic layouts, forced to bunk with a human, whose approach to engineering was likely as erratic to her as human unpredictability itself. Kevin placed his duffel on the narrow bed, noticing her gaze shift briefly to the bag, a faint expression of distaste crossing her otherwise impassive face. He guessed it had to do with how casually humans handled their belongings, another point of divergence between their species. "So what do you think of human ships?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Lunara tilted her head slightly, her expression impenetrable. "Your designs are unconventional, less structured, more reliant on adaptability. Xar-Anthans avoid the unknown. We design systems to eliminate variables, ensuring stability." Quote. The last word was delivered with a tone of reverence, as if it were the core of Xar-Anthan philosophy. Kevin let out a low chuckle. "Stability sounds nice in theory, but out here we're dealing with anomalies left and right. Unpredictability is part of the job." Her eyes met his, her gaze steady. "You embrace it then?" "Most of us do," he said, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall. "Fear's part of the job too. We just learn to work through it." He watched her closely, wondering if any of his words resonated with her. Her reaction surprised him. A faint look of contemplation softened her features, as if his words stirred something within her. Perhaps an unspoken curiosity. Night came, and despite the strange company, exhaustion eventually claimed Kevin. He sank onto the bed, realizing the awkwardness of their setup. About the sleeping arrangement?" he started, glancing at Lunara, who had taken a seat near the wall, her tall figure casting a faint shadow across the room. "Xar-anthans require less sleep," she replied before he could finish. "You may have the bed." She spoke it like an order, with a tone that invited no argument. "Thanks," he nodded, adjusting himself on the narrow mattress. As he closed his eyes, he could feel her presence, her silent, observant gaze fixed somewhere past him, focused, as if processing the strangeness of it all. Minutes passed in silence. Then her voice, soft and almost tentative, broke through the stillness. "Kevin?" she began, his name sounding foreign on her tongue. "Do humans often fear, they?" Kevin blinked, surprised. "Fear of what?" "The unknown," she replied, her tone distant, almost contemplative. "Xar-anthans avoid it, trained to shield ourselves from it, but you seem to seek it." Kevin paused, caught off guard by her honesty. "Yeah, I guess we do," he said, leaning up slightly, his voice thoughtful. "We don't always know what's out there, but that's kind of the point. We learn as we go." He met her gaze, noting the flicker of something in her eyes. A question, perhaps, or a challenge. The silence returned deeper this time, as if his answer had struck something she couldn't voice. He wondered if the mission itself, the unexplained signals, the potential dangers ahead, unnerved her in a way he couldn't grasp. To him, the uncertainty was just another aspect of space travel. But for Lunara, raised in a world where precision and predictability ruled, this journey might be more unnerving than he'd realized. Turning back toward the wall, Kevin finally let his eyes close, his thoughts still lingering on the quiet, calculated woman seated only a few feet away. The hum of the Valiant's engines pulsed softly through the ship's framework, a constant reminder of the vast, uncharted darkness surrounding them. Kevin stood hunched over the holographic display in the engineering bay, his brow furrowed, eyes narrowed in frustration. They'd barely crossed into the unknown region, and already the ship was reacting poorly. The mysterious energy pulses were battering their systems, causing flickering power issues and making every red warning light on the control panel blaze like a fever. In front of him, the hologram displayed an intricate, spinning layout of the Valiant's core. He scrutinized each component, trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead, his mind juggling potential solutions to the cascade of issues that seemed to compound by the minute. But then, the door slid open, and a shadow cast along the polished floor pulled his focus from the hologram. Lunara entered, with her signature poised grace, her blue skin a cool contrast to the fiery lights illuminating the control panels. Her eyes swept the room, pausing on the various malfunctioning displays, before settling on Kevin with a faint trace of something in her gaze. Maybe it was concern or something close to impatience. "Are all human ships this?" she began, searching for the right word. "Vulnerable?" The question had no malice, only the bluntness Kevin was coming to recognize as distinctly Xar-anthian. Still, it hit a sore spot. The last thing he wanted to admit was just how close they were to a full systems failure. "Not vulnerable, just exposed," he replied, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "We push the limits. None of these malfunctions are unexpected, given where we're headed." She raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in her slight frown. "Xar-anthan vessels are designed for stability," she said, her tone almost matter-of-fact, as though the words themselves carried centuries of proven tradition. "We anticipate every possible disruption, leaving little room for such improvisation." "Improvisation is what keeps this ship alive," Kevin replied, though he sensed that their conversation wasn't likely to bridge this difference. "Human engineering," he added with a faint smirk, "adapts when things go wrong. We can't anticipate everything, but we can adapt to anything." Her gaze remained steady, her expression a mix of curiosity and reserved judgment. "Adaptation," she echoed, as though testing the weight of the word. "In my world, we see it as a lack of preparation." Kevin let out a low chuckle, though tension lingered beneath it. "Maybe out here you'll see it differently." Their conversation halted as the ship shuddered violently, nearly knocking him off his feet. Alarm bells wailed through the bay, piercing and relentless. Kevin's pulse quickened. The monitors flashed with warnings that the stabilizers were failing fast. Now, the energy pulses had spiked again, wreaking havoc on their systems, and the ship was veering dangerously out of alignment. "Core temperature spiking," he muttered, already lunging for the control panel to address the stabilizers. Lunara moved beside him, her calm movements in eerie contrast to the urgency that buzzed through him. She studied the panel's flickering readouts, her fingers hovering over the control keys, assessing, calculating. "We'll have to divert auxiliary power to the stabilizer," she said, her voice steady. "But it will increase the reactor's temperature beyond safe limits. We'll need to monitor it manually." He hesitated, weighing her suggestion. The risks were high, but as his mind calculated the alternatives, he realized there were no better options. He gave her a quick nod. "I'll handle the manual overrides on the reactor." Without waiting for her response, he sprinted to the panel at the far end of the bay, pulling open the hatch to reveal a mess of wires and circuits. Heat poured out of the compartment, thick and suffocating. The reactor's pressure was reaching critical levels, and he could feel the vibration of the machinery through the deck plates. Behind him, Lunara's voice rang out, clear and precise. "Be cautious. The stabilizers are fragile, and any fluctuation could trigger a chain reaction. I'll monitor the main levels from here." Her words were clipped, efficient, and though he appreciated her steady guidance, there was no time for thanks. He reached into the compartment, carefully isolating the power conduits before rerouting the flow through the stabilizers. Each wire sparked faintly as he connected it, the heat intensifying by the second. Sweat trickled down his brow, stinging his eyes as he focused on the circuits, his hands moving quickly but precisely. Suddenly, a low groan rumbled from the stabilizer nearest to Lunara. The panel buckled under the strain, and a high-pitched whine pierced the air, signaling a dangerous overload. "Lunara!" he shouted, his voice rising over the noise. "Get clear!" But instead of retreating, she moved closer, analyzing the panel as though she could will it into compliance. Her fingers danced over the controls, her movements exact and fearless. He watched in astonishment as she rerouted power through an alternate node, her gaze intense and unflinching. "It's stable," she announced, but her face betrayed the strain of maintaining control for now. "But we don't have much time." The tension thickened as Kevin finished the last adjustments. Just as he pulled his hands from the panel, a loud pop rang out, followed by a searing flash. Sparks flew, filling the room with the smell of burning metal, and before he could react, Lunara grabbed his arm, yanking him backward out of the panel's range. He stumbled, caught off guard by her strength and the unexpected protective gesture. "Are you always this reckless?" she demanded, her gaze flashing with a rare intensity. Kevin grinned, half breathless. "Only when I have to be." She didn't release his arm immediately, and for a brief moment, they stood there close, eyes locked, in an unspoken understanding. Her grip was firm, steadying him, but he sensed the faintest hint of worry beneath her composed exterior. It was a fleeting moment, but it revealed a glimpse of her beyond the controlled Xar-Anthian demeanor. Breaking the silence, she released him, her expression hardening back into neutrality. "The core is stabilizing," she stated, her voice cool once more. "Your improvisation appears effective." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck, surprised by the faint hint of approval in her words. "I'll take that as a compliment." They returned to the consoles, their pace slower now as the alarms faded into silence. Together, they monitored the readings. The only sounds in the room, the faint hum of machinery, and their own steady breathing. The threat had passed, yet something significant lingered. A fragile understanding born from shared crisis. As the minutes stretched, Kevin broke the silence, his voice thoughtful. "You know, you're different from what I expected." She tilted her head slightly, curiosity gleaming in her dark eyes. "And what did you expect?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe someone a bit colder, but you handled that crisis with grit, almost like you faced it before." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though she quickly suppressed it. "You are not entirely predictable either, human. I find your tendency to act without precise calculations unsettling." There was no hint of insult in her tone, only quiet honesty. He shrugged. "It's what we do out here. We don't always get the luxury of planning things down to the last detail. It's a messy business, space travel." For a moment they held each other's gaze, the silence between them now softened by mutual respect. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was an understanding that bridged the gulf between their worlds. Finally, Lunara straightened her posture, regaining its formal Xar-Anthian stiffness. "Our mission is only beginning, and the risks will increase as we proceed further." "Guess that means we'll have to get used to each other's quirks," Kevin replied with a faint smile, his tone light but his words carrying an undertone of trust. She inclined her head, her expression shifting subtly, almost a nod of acceptance. Then, without another word, she turned back to the console, her focus returning to the mission. But as they continued working side by side in the soft glow of the control panels, Kevin felt the weight of the moment. They weren't just engineers anymore. They were partners, bound by the high stakes and the tenuous connection that had formed through crisis. In the silence of that small bay, beneath the hum of a ship teetering on the edge of danger, they'd found the first seeds of understanding. The cold seeped into the Valiant, biting through the walls as the lights flickered off, leaving Kevin and Lunara in a dim, shadowed quiet. The ship's power grid had finally given in to the relentless energy pulses, shutting down all non-essential systems, including heat. Kevin could already feel the chill setting into his skin, sinking into his bones. It would only get worse from here. He looked across the cramped quarters, where Lunara sat on the edge of the bed, her arms folded tightly. Her normally calm demeanor had grown taut with the encroaching cold. Her skin, a deep blue in the faint emergency glow, seemed even paler than usual. "This is unsustainable," she murmured, her voice laced with an unfamiliar edge of vulnerability. Her Xaranthian physiology wasn't built for these temperatures. She looked as though the colds were draining her. Kevin stood, moving closer until he could see the subtle tremor in her hands. "We're going to have to keep each other warm," he said, his tone practical, keeping any emotion out of it. "Body heat's our best option." She looked at him, her eyes studying his face with a guarded expression. For a moment he thought she might refuse, her pride unwilling to yield to human warmth. But the chill won out, and with a faint nod she moved over, making room for him under the narrow blanket. He climbed in beside her, the bed barely large enough to accommodate them both, the edges pressing them close together. As the cold intensified, Lunara shivered, despite her best efforts to remain still. Kevin felt a rush of warmth, not from the temperature, but from an unexpected protectiveness toward her. Tentatively, he shifted closer, his arm wrapping around her shoulders, hoping the gesture was welcome. Lunara stiffened at first, her body taut beneath his touch, but she gradually relaxed, leaning into his warmth with a reluctant sigh. Her skin was cool against his, the softness of her shoulder a contrast to the hard lines of her posture. Kevin found himself breathing slower, each inhale mingling with hers, their closeness dispelling the cold in a way that felt almost intimate. "Human resilience," she murmured after a moment, her voice low, her words laced with faint curiosity. "It continues to surprise me." He chuckled softly, shifting his arm to draw her closer. "We're stubborn, I guess. Adaptable, though. I don't think any human training could prepare me for sharing a bed with a Xaranthian." A faint smile touched her lips. "Adaptation, it seems, extends beyond engineering." Their words dissolved into silence, a warm, heavy quiet that wrapped around them. Kevin could feel the steady beat of her pulse where her hand rested against his chest, each soft rise and fall syncing with his own. The tension that had once defined their interaction melted, replaced by something more delicate. A new layer of understanding, woven from shared warmth and vulnerability. He traced his fingers along her arm, a gesture both comforting and exploratory, testing the boundaries between them. Lunara's gaze followed his movement, her eyes softening, becoming less guarded as they lingered on his face. Tentatively, she brought her hand to his cheek, her touch feather-light, as though curious about the warmth of human skin. Her voice was a mere whisper. "Such warmth you carry. You wield it like it's a part of you." "It is," he replied, meeting her gaze with a mixture of fascination and something deeper. "We're warm-blooded, Harry. We hold on to the heat we create. I guess it's another way we survive." Her fingers lingered on his cheek, tracing along his jaw a touch, both gentle and intense. Kevin felt his breath hitch, his pulse quickening beneath her cool fingertips. As if sensing his reaction, Lunara's expression softened, her eyes searching his with a vulnerability that surprised him. Then, as naturally as a falling leaf, her face drew closer, her eyes half closed as she tilted her head. He felt her breath brush his lips, cool and faint like a whisper, and before he could think, he leaned in, closing the space between them. Their lips met, her cool softness melting against his warmth, the kiss a blend of curiosity and intensity. It was tentative at first, a soft brush, but the moment deepened as he felt her lean into him, her hands slipping to the back of his neck. He reciprocated, his fingers threading through her silken hair, drawing her closer as the world seemed to fall away. The cold was forgotten, as if their shared heat had banished it entirely. The room, dim and shadowed, was lost to everything but the moment between them. Lunara's hand traced down his shoulder, her fingers brushing his arm, mapping his warmth as though it were a foreign landscape. Breaking the kiss, she lingered close, her forehead resting against his as she caught her breath. There was a softness in her gaze that he hadn't seen before, a flicker of vulnerability she allowed him to glimpse. "I didn't think," she began, her voice faint, almost hesitant. "I didn't expect human touch to be so potent." He smiled, brushing a thumb along her cheek, savoring the sensation of her skin against his. "I didn't expect a Zaranthian's touch to feel like this," he murmured, unable to find the words that captured the warmth and connection that had flared between them. For a long time they remained tangled together, her head nestled against his chest, their breaths slow and mingling. The cold still lingered in the air, but together they defied it, their bodies wrapped in an unspoken bond that bridged the distance between their worlds. Eventually, Lunara's hand drifted to rest over his heart, her fingers dancing against his chest, as though testing the beat of a different rhythm. She looked up, her eyes searching his. "You humans are deeply adaptable," she said, her tone thoughtful, as though she were studying some unknown marvel. Kevin chuckled, his hand tracing lazy circles along her back. "Or maybe we're just drawn to the unknown." A faint smile touched her lips. "Perhaps." She paused, her gaze shifting away for a moment before she continued, her voice almost a whisper. "I've lived my life by predictability, by strict codes of Zaranthian conduct. But this, it's new." Kevin felt a pang of understanding, recognizing the barrier she was crossing to share this moment with him. "Maybe the unknown isn't so terrible after all," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. They remained together, wrapped in silence, the boundaries between them dissolving. The hum of the Valiant system started up again, vibrating softly through the walls as the power returned, gradually warming the ship and illuminating its darkened corridors. Kevin stirred, feeling the warmth of Lunara's presence beside him, her breath soft and steady against his shoulder. For a brief moment, he let himself savor this closeness, an unusual intimacy forged in the grip of survival. But as the lights flickered fully to life, the reality of their mission returned, sharp and cold. A loud alarm cut through the air, shattering the silence. Both of them jerked upright, instantly alert, their thoughts aligning once more to duty. Kevin moved first, swinging his legs over the bed, reaching for his gear. "I'll head to the bridge," he said, his tone already businesslike, though he risked a quick glance back at her, finding her gaze steady and resolute. Lunara, already zipping up her jacket, gave him a brisk nod. "I'll handle the core diagnostics and engineering. We may not have much time before the next surge." They left the room without another word, the brief reprieve of their shared night falling behind them as they stepped into the cold corridors of the Valiant, each now fully in their roles. Kevin quickened his pace, moving through the familiar twists of the ship's passageways, his mind sharpening to the task ahead. On the bridge, he found the entire crew on high alert. Officers manned their stations with tense concentration, their fingers flying over screens and controls as they struggled to keep the ship steady. Captain Ree caught sight of him and waved him over, his expression taut, lines of worry etched across his face. "Good timing, Tate," Ree said. "We picked up another series of pulses, stronger this time. They're converging on us, and it's not random. They're moving in a pattern, almost like an approach." The words hit like a punch, and Kevin's mind raced to keep up. "So whatever's out there isn't just a natural phenomenon." Ree's mouth tightened. "It's aware of us. We might be dealing with an intelligent source." A cold chill settled over the bridge as the implications sank in. This wasn't just some random anomaly they were facing. It was something deliberate, something that seemed to have a purpose in reaching out to them. Kevin's thoughts flashed to Lunara down in engineering, wondering if she was detecting the same escalation. Whatever this was, they would have to face it head on. The ship shuddered violently, and Kevin grabbed the console to steady himself. The pulses had intensified, rattling through every bolt and plate. Warning lights flashed as the stabilizers struggled to cope with the surges that rocked them, and the air grew thick with tension. Meanwhile, down in engineering, Lunara was immersed in the chaos of failing systems, her gaze glued to the main control panel. The energy pulses were wreaking havoc on the ship's core, pushing it closer to overload with each passing second. Her mind worked in quick, precise calculations as she directed the engineering crew, her voice steady even as the danger mounted. "We're close to critical on core stability," a technician reported, his face pale with worry. If this continues, we hit full overload in under 10 minutes. Lunara's fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power to auxiliary circuits and diverting energy away from non-essential systems. Shut down all non-essential power sources, she ordered, her voice a firm anchor amidst the rising tension. Divert everything to shield regeneration. I'll make the manual adjustments to the core. The crew obeyed without hesitation, and Lunara steeled herself, feeling the weight of their safety on her shoulders. She had faced many crises in her life, but this one was different. This time, an unknown force was actively pressing against them, testing their strength. The ship lurched again, and a loud crack split the air as a control panel nearby sparked, sending a hot jet of sparks flying. Lunara ducked, then grabbed the console for balance. As she regained her footing, her eyes scanned the readings, flashing an angry red, each warning more dire than the last. They were fast approaching a critical threshold. Her hand hovered over the comms as she opened the line to the bridge. "Kevin," she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "Core stability is deteriorating quickly. These pulses, they're not random. They're reaching for us." There was a pause, a flicker of silence as her words sank in. When Kevin replied, his voice held a note of disbelief. "Are you saying it's intelligent?" "It's a pattern," she answered, choosing her words carefully, scanning the data again. "Purposeful, almost tactile. It's as if this entity is probing our systems, testing their resilience." Kevin's voice came back over the line, disbelief replaced by a hardened determination. "Captain Reese suspects the same. If we can't stabilize soon, we may have to evacuate." Lunara tightened her grip on the console. "No, we're holding. I'll recalibrate the core manually. We need more time." Up on the bridge, Kevin exchanged a look with Ree, his own resolve mirrored in the captain's weary gaze. They were cutting it close, but abandoning the mission now, when they were on the verge of uncovering something extraordinary, felt impossible. "We hold the course," Ree agreed, his voice carrying the weight of his command. He turned to the crew, barking orders to sustain the shield generators and reroute power to stabilize the ship systems. Minutes passed like hours as they worked, each officer on the bridge completely absorbed in their tasks. Sweat trickled down Kevin's temple as he monitored the readings, the ship still rattling under the pressure of the relentless pulses. Finally, there was a flicker of stability in the system. He felt a wave of relief as the warnings faded, the lights returning to their steady glow. "Core stabilized." Lunara's voice came over the comm, weary but triumphant. "Shields are holding at 70%. Kevin's heart lifted. "Good work, Lunara. You kept us steady." He could almost imagine her faint smile through the static, a quiet acknowledgement of their teamwork. "As did you, human." The bridge exhaled collectively, tension easing as they took in the fact that they had made it through the worst of the assault. But just as relief settled, a new sound filled the air, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through every wall, every panel. It wasn't part of the ship's systems. It was something else entirely. The hum was neither mechanical nor natural. It echoed strange and haunting, seeming to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The bridge went still, every officer looking around in confusion and unease as the sound deepened, filling the space with an eerie, otherworldly presence. Kevin felt his skin prickle, an instinctual reaction to something unknown, something far beyond their comprehension. He turned to Ree, whose face had drained of color. "What? What is that?" The hum intensified, and the communications console sparked to life. The signal wasn't human. It was alien. A frequency unlike any they'd encountered. The tones shifted, twisting and pulsing, until somehow they began to form distinct sounds. Words, almost. Lunara's voice came over the line, calm yet tense. "Kevin, I'm picking up a signal within the frequency. It's not random. It's communication." The entire bridge went silent. Every face turned toward the console as the hum morphed, becoming more structured. And then, with chilling clarity, words emerged from the static, a spectral voice that echoed through the speakers. "We know you." The words hung in the air, each syllable deliberate and slow, as though the entity were testing its own voice. Kevin felt a shiver run down his spine. Whatever this was, it was alive, aware, and reaching out to them in a language it was piecing together in real time. Ree swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. Can we decode it further? Kevin exchanged a look with Lunara on the monitor, their minds working in unison. Lunara, are you detecting any recognizable patterns? Anything that might tell us more? She leaned closer to her screen, her gaze intense. It doesn't match any Xar-Anthian dialect, but the structure is complex, deliberate. This isn't an idle signal. It's learning. Kevin's mind raced, piecing together what little they knew. This entity wasn't just observing them. It was engaging, testing their responses, probing for weaknesses or alliances. The implication sent a jolt through him, and he turned to Ree, his expression grim. We need to respond, he said, feeling the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. We can't afford to ignore it. Ree hesitated, torn between caution and necessity, but before he could speak, the message repeated, clearer and sharper this time. We? No. You. Lunara's voice, faint but steady, came through the calm. If it's reaching out, it may be assessing us, trying to determine if we're worth engagement or if we pose a threat. A chill ran through the bridge as her words sank in. This wasn't just a random encounter. It was a calculated test, one that would determine their fate. Kevin tightened his grip on the console, his mind brimming with questions and a grim determination. Whatever this entity was, it was a force unlike anything they'd encountered, and they were its target. He turned to Ree, his voice low but unwavering. We need to prepare for anything. If it's testing us, we're either an experiment or a threat, and I'd rather prove we're neither. Ree nodded, his face hardening with resolve. We face it head-on then. No, surrender. Kevin felt a surge of resolve, and as he glanced at Lunara's image on the screen, he saw the same determination in her eyes. They had survived this far together, and no entity, however powerful, would tear them apart. Let it come, he murmured, a quiet challenge. We're ready. The bridge fell into silence once more as the hum faded, leaving them with the profound stillness of the unknown. A stillness that pulsed with both threat and promise, waiting for the next move. The bridge was silent, every officer caught in the grip of the entity's voice, the spectral words still echoing, each one deliberate, like it was piecing together the very idea of speech. We observe you. The words hung in the air, neither friendly nor hostile, but full of something vast and complex. Kevin's heart pounded as he leaned over the console, trying to steady his breath. The weight of what they were facing settled on him, making him feel small, but strangely exhilarated. This was the unknown they had come searching for, intelligent, alien, and reaching out. Captain Ree! Kevin's voice was tense. We're playing with fire. If it's studying us, then we either a puzzle or prey. Kevin glanced at Ree, his mind racing. If it's observing, maybe it's trying to understand something it's never encountered before. Individuality, separation. We might be the first thing it's ever seen with boundaries. Ree looked skeptical but nodded slowly, turning his attention back to the screen. We don't want to show any weakness, Tate. If this thing has a concept of a threat, it might be us. The lights on the bridge flickered as the hum of the entity returned, low and resonant. The anomaly pulsed with a strange rhythm, and Kevin had the unsettling feeling it was waiting for their response, hovering on the edge of action, poised between curiosity and power. Kevin reached for the communicator, a resolve steadying him. Lunara, are you seeing any further patterns in its signal? Her voice came through, calm yet tinged with a hint of awe. Yes, Kevin. The pulses, each one aligns with a harmonic sequence, almost as if it's mirroring us. It's learning from every signal we send, adjusting its energy to match ours. This is not just a being, it's a consciousness. The implications sent a chill through him, but he steadied himself, thinking through the risks. They had made it this far, and whatever this entity was, it had held back, choosing communication over force. It had watched them and waited, maybe as unsure of them as they were of it. Kevin spoke into the comm, his voice calm but firm. We understand you're observing us. We're explorers seeking knowledge. We mean no harm. The hum grew, filling the air, vibrating the walls as if the entity were responding to his words, not with a voice, but with presence. The lights dimmed and brightened in rhythm, casting shadows across the bridge in a pattern that felt almost intentional. We seek existence, the entity intoned, its voice low and resonant. Boundaries are unknown. A quiet murmur spread through the crew as they registered its words. This wasn't an enemy or a predator. It was a consciousness trying to understand something fundamental. An explorer in its own way, reaching out into the darkness much like they were. Naira's voice broke the silence, her tone softer, almost reverent. Kevin, it's trying to understand us, to understand itself, by reaching through us. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. This being, immense and incomprehensible, was adrift in an endless void, searching for meaning, for connection. It had reached across the cosmos and found them beings with limits and separateness, concepts it could only grasp by touching those limits. Kevin's voice softened, yet he spoke with conviction. Connection gives meaning to boundaries. By knowing others, we come to know ourselves. The hum shifted, vibrating at a softer frequency, as though the entity were trying to grasp this concept, reaching for something it had never known. The lights on the bridge steadied, and a calm settled over the room, as if the entity's presence were no longer a threat, but a gentle inquiry. Then suddenly, the anomaly surged closer, and the ship shuddered as its system strained under the entity's power. Ree's face went pale as he barked out, "Tate, whatever you're doing, the ship can't handle much more. This thing's energy output is beyond anything we've encountered. If it keeps up, it could tear us apart." Kevin felt a pang of urgency. They were on the edge of discovery, but their ship systems couldn't withstand prolonged contact. He glanced at Naira's image on the console, a silent plea in his eyes. She nodded, understanding instantly. "Kevin, it's testing us, but it needs to know that limits exist. Too close, and we risk destruction." He turned back to the console, his voice firm as he addressed the entity. "To connect, there must be distance. Too close, and we risk destruction. Now, we are separate beings, each with our own space. Respect that, and we can understand each other." The hum dimmed, and for a moment everything was still. Then, as if in acknowledgement, the lights on the bridge steadied, and the energy readings leveled off. The presence around them shifted, withdrawing slightly as though the entity were finally grasping the importance of limits. "We understand boundaries," it intoned, the tone gentler, more reflective. A wave of relief washed over the bridge as the strain on the ship's systems eased. The entity had recognized the importance of distance, of letting them exist within their own boundaries. It was a tentative piece, but it held. Then, with a final hum that resonated through the ship, the entity seemed to release its hold, drawing back into the vastness of space. The lights flickered softly as its energy withdrew, and for a moment there was a strange, almost melodic sound of farewell, a sort of vibrating through the walls and consoles, like a musical echo. We are not alone." Its final words lingered in the air, carrying a sense of gratitude, a connection that transcended words or understanding. Kevin felt a surge of emotion as he listened to those words, realizing they had given this being something it had sought for eons, a glimpse of companionship, a sense of belonging even in the vast reaches of space. The entity's presence faded entirely, and the bridge fell silent, leaving only the steady hum of the ship's systems. Each crew member sat in quiet awe, processing what they had just experienced, the enormity of the encounter settling over them like a gentle weight. Kevin glanced at Naira's image on the screen, seeing the same wonder mirrored in her eyes. She gave him a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had shared, not just with the entity, but with each other. Captain Ree cleared his throat, his voice breaking the silence. "We've made contact with something beyond anything we imagined, and we've come through it intact." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the bridge crew, his expression softened by the awe of what they'd witnessed. "We've touched the unknown, and it touched us back." The crew murmured in agreement, their faces reflecting a mix of relief, pride, and humility. They had journeyed to the edge of knowledge, and they had returned, changed, with an understanding that went beyond science or exploration. As the bridge crew returned to their stations, Kevin remained for a moment, lost in thought. He had come on this mission, looking for new frontiers, new discoveries, and he had found something far greater, a connection that spanned the very fabric of existence, reminding him of the blessed reach of life, even in the most unexpected places. He turned and left the bridge, heading down to the engineering bay, where he found Naira waiting. She looked up as he approached, her expression calm but warm, the spark of shared experience still evident in her eyes. She spoke softly, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. We have learned that even in the vastness of space, connection is what defines us. It is what keeps us from being lost. Kevin nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in his heart. Yes, and we are all explorers seeking those connections no matter how far we have to reach. They stood together in silence, united by their shared journey, knowing that their encounter with the entity had not only shown them the vastness of the universe, but it also brought them closer, revealing something profound and unbreakable between them. And in that stillness, as they gazed into each other's eyes, they understood that they too were no longer alone, bound together not only by duty, but by the discovery that even in the furthest reach of the unknown, connection could be found. As they moved deeper into the facility, more systems activated, responding to their presence. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing star maps and schematics for massive structures that defied comprehension. They found themselves in what appeared to be a central control room, its walls lined with pulsing, organic-looking technology. Aurora approached one of the interfaces, her eyes closed in concentration as she reached out with her telepathic abilities. "Patrick," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can access their records. This facility, it was built by an ancient race. They were peacekeepers maintaining balance in the galaxy." As Aurora delved deeper into the alien databanks, Patrick and Nova explored the room. Nova paused in front of a large view screen, her eyes widening. "Patrick, look at this." The screen showed what appeared to be genetic sequences eerily similar to those Patrick had seen in the files on the enhanced Evrian girls. "It can't be," he muttered, studying the display. Aurora joined them, her face pale. "It's true," she said. "The genetic modifications, our abilities, they're connected to this ancient race we were created to use their technology." Before Patrick could process this revelation, a low hum filled the air. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. As they cautiously approached, they saw a sleek pod-like structure rise from the opening inside the pod. Visible through a translucent cover was a being unlike anything they had ever seen. Its features were vaguely humanoid, but with an otherworldly quality that left no doubt about its alien nature. "Is it alive?" Nova asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patrick checked the readouts on the pod. "It's in stasis," he confirmed. "Has been for thousands of years at least." Suddenly the facility around them shuddered. Alarms blared as sections of the structure began to seal themselves off. Patrick realized with a sinking feeling that their presence had triggered some kind of security protocol. "We're trapped," Aurora said, her eyes wide with fear, as systems continued to activate around them, bathing the room in pulsing alien light. Patrick knew they had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. With the unconscious ancient being as a silent witness, he faced his team, acutely aware that their next moves could shape the future of not just their mission, but potentially the entire galaxy. The enormity of their discovery greatly troubled Patrick's mind as he surveyed the control room, its alien technology pulsing with newfound energy. "We need to find a way out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "Aurora, keep working on deciphering those systems. Nova, see if you can use your abilities to power up any dormant consoles as well." As the girls set to work, Patrick activated his comm link drive. "Vega, do you copy?" "I'm here, Patrick," came the scientist's voice, crackling with static. "What's your status?" Patrick quickly relayed their situation, describing the ancient facility and the stasis pod containing the alien being. Dr. Vega listened intently, his scientific curiosity evident even through the distorted communication. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Patrick, I have a suggestion. It's risky, but it might be our best option. We should attempt to wake the being in stasis." "Dead." Patrick frowned. "Are you sure that's wise? Think about it." Dr. Vega urged, "This being likely has intimate knowledge of the facility. It could be our key to understanding this technology, and more importantly, deactivating the lockdown protocols." As Patrick considered the proposal, Nova called out from across the room, "Patrick, you need to see this." He hurried over to where Nova stood, her hands glowing as she channeled energy into a previously dark console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex network of lines and nodes. "It looks like some kind of map," Nova said, her eyes wide with wonder. Aurora joined them. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she reached out with her telepathic abilities. "It's more than that," she said softly. "It's a map of wormholes spanning the entire galaxy." The implications of this discovery sent Patrick's pupils dilating. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next.
"All right," he said, addressing his team. "We're going to wake our sleeping friend. But first, we need to be prepared for anything." As if on cue, Marcus's voice came through the sea. "Sir, you're going to want to see this. We found something." Patrick followed the security officer's directions, leading his team down a narrow corridor adjacent to the control room. They entered a chamber that took their breath away. Lining the walls were racks upon racks of sleek, otherworldly devices, unmistakably weapons and defensive technology. "It's like an armory," Olivia breathed, running her hand along one of the devices. To everyone's surprise, it hummed to life at her touch. "Careful," Patrick cautioned. "We don't know what these do." Marcus, Olivia, start cataloging this equipment. See what responds to human touch and what doesn't. We might need it sooner rather than later. As the security officers began their inventory, Patrick led Aurora and Nova back to the central chamber. The stasis pod loomed before them, its occupant still and silent within. "Aurora, can you interface with the pod systems?" Patrick asked. The young telepath nodded, placing her hands on the smooth surface of the pod. Her eyes closed in concentration, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with psychic energy. I think I can initiate the revival sequence," she said, her voice strained with effort. Patrick took a deep breath. "Do it." As Aurora began the process, the facility around them surged with power. Holographic displays sprang to life throughout the chamber, projecting dizzying arrays of stars and swirling vortexes, the wormhole network they had glimpsed earlier. The pod's surface began to glow, lines of energy racing across its contours. With a hiss of escaping gas, the top of the pod slowly opened, revealing its occupant. The being that emerged was unlike anything Patrick had ever seen, tall and lithe, with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors in the light. It possessed multiple eyes that blinked open, taking in its surroundings with evident intelligence. "Greetings," the being said, its voice resonating in Patrick's mind rather than his ears. "I am Zoril of the Eternal Guardians. You have awakened me from my long slumber. For what purpose?" Patrick stepped forward, acutely aware of the weight of this moment. "We are humans and ever Martians," he said, gesturing to his team. "We've come seeking answers about this facility and about our own origins." Zoril, many eyes focused on Aurora and Nova, a flicker of recognition passing through them. "Ah," he said, "you are the culmination of our work, the next generation of peacekeepers." As Zoril began to explain the true nature of their mission and the role of the Eternal Guardians, the facility around them hummed with renewed purpose. Outside, the sounds of battle began to fade as Zoril accessed the outpost defenses, activating a powerful energy shield that repelled the equilibrium-directed forces. Patrick listened intently as the ancient being revealed the truth about the genetic modifications of the Evergirls and the grand design behind their creation. Yet even as understanding dawned, a new alert sounded from the facility's long-range sensors. A massive fleet was entering the star system, its energy signatures matching those of the Equilibrium Directive. Patrick realized with a sinking feeling that their enemies had called for reinforcements. As Zoril offered to unlock the full potential of the Evergirls' abilities and provide access to Eternal Guardian technology, Patrick found himself faced with an impossible choice: embrace this new alliance and the power it offered, potentially drawing even more dangerous factions into the conflict, or attempt to escape XR-27 with their newfound knowledge and seek allies elsewhere. The ancient facility thrummed with awakened power, and Patrick could feel the weight of galaxies on his shoulders. Time was running out, and the decision he made now would shape not just their mission, but the fate of entire civilizations. Patrick took a deep breath, his mind racing as he prepared to make his choice. The consequences of his decision would echo across the stars, forever changing the course of human and ever in history. The gravity of the situation burdened immensely on Patrick as he locked eyes with Zoril, the ancient being's otherworldly gaze seeming to peer into his very soul. "We accept your offer, Patrick," said his voice firm and resolute. "Show us how to unlock the girl's full potential." Zoril nodded, a ripple of iridescent color flowing across his skin. "Follow me," he said, his mental voice echoing in their minds. As they moved deeper into the facility, Patrick activated his comlink drive. Vega initiates the process for unlocking the Everin girl's abilities. We're going all in. Understood, came the scientist's reply, a mix of excitement and trepidation in his voice. The ancient guardian led them to a hidden chamber, its walls pulsing with organic technology. 5 pod-like devices dominated the center of the room, each humming with latent energy. These will facilitate the awakening, Zoral explained, gesturing to the pods as if on cue. Celeste, Aara, and Lyra burst into the chamber, their faces flushed from the ongoing battle outside. We got your message, Celeste said, her eyes wide as she took in the alien technology surrounding them. Patrick nodded quickly, briefing them on the situation. The girls exchanged glances, a mix of anticipation and nervousness evident in their expressions. Are you ready? Patrick asked, his gaze moving from one Everin to the next. They nodded in unison, stepping forward to claim their pods. As each girl settled into place, the devices hummed to life, enveloping them in a cocoon of pulsating energy. Patrick's calm crackled with urgency. Sir Marcus's voice cut through. The Equilibrium Directive fleet has entered the system. We're detecting massive energy signatures. Understood, Patrick replied, his eyes hardened. Fortify our defenses. Use everything we've got. He turned to Zoral. We need weapons, anything you can give us to hold them off. The ancient being nodded, leading Patrick and the human security officers to the armory they had discovered earlier. With a wave of his hand, Zoral activated the alien weaponry, each device coming to life with a soft hum. These will serve you well, Zoral said, but be warned, their power is unlike anything you have wielded before. Marcus and Olivia quickly began familiarizing themselves with the new technology, their eyes wide, with a mix of awe and purpose. Outside, the planet itself seemed to respond to the awakening of the ancient facility. The ground trembled as massive vines erupted from the earth, intertwining with the energy shield that now enveloped their position. Crystalline structures sprouted alongside the organic growth, forming a natural fortress that pulsed with power. Patrick coordinated with Captain Holt, directing their forces to strategic positions around the facility. The newly acquired Eternal Guardian weapons proved devastatingly effective against the first wave of Equilibrium Directive ground forces. As the battle raged, Patrick split his attention between the defense efforts and the chamber where the Everrating girls underwent their transformation. The pods pulsed with increasing intensity, the air around them shimmering with psychic energy. Suddenly Aurora's pod hissed open. She emerged, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Patrick watched in amazement as she reached out with her mind instantly connecting with every defender in their ranks. I can see them all, she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Every soldier, every ship in orbit. I can coordinate our entire defense. One by one, the other pods opened. Celeste stepped out, the ground beneath her feet rippling in response to her newfound power. Nova's hands crackled with energy, while Aara moved among the defenders, healing injuries with a mere touch. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Vega's voice cut through on the comm. Patrick, I found something crucial in the facility's databanks. The location of the Equilibrium Directive's Central Command Center. It's hidden in a remote star system, but with this information we could strike at the heart of their operation. Patrick's mind raced with the possibilities this new intelligence presented. He turned to Zoral, who had been observing the battle with keen interest. Is there a way we can launch a counterattack? Patrick asked. Hit their command center while defending this position. Zorthal's many eyes blinked in rapid succession. There is a way, he said, his mental voice tinged with admiration for Patrick's strategic thinking. This facility houses an ancient interstellar portal, part of a network we Eternal Guardians used to maintain peace across the galaxy. It could transport a small team directly to the coordinates of their command center. Patrick's pulse quickened at the prospect. How quickly can we get it operational? The process will take time, Zoral cautioned, and it will draw significant power from our defenses. Your team will need to hold off the enemy forces long enough for the portal to activate and for your strike team to complete their mission. Patrick nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. He began selecting members for the strike team, choosing a mix of human and Everin operatives best suited for the crucial mission ahead. As Zoral led them to the long-dormant portal chamber, Patrick briefed his chosen team: Aurora for telepathic coordination, Nova for energy manipulation, Captain Holt for tactical expertise, and Marcus for his quick adaptation to the alien weaponry.
The ancient portal loomed before them, its surface shimmering with latent energy. As Zoral worked to activate the device, Patrick and his team geared up with the most advanced Eternal Guardian technology available. The facility shuddered under the continued assault of the Equilibrium Directive forces. Patrick knew that every second counted. As the portal slowly flickered to life, he turned to his strike team, acutely aware that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of XR-27, but potentially the entire galaxy. "Ready?" he asked, meeting each team member's gaze. They nodded, their faces set with commitment. As the portal flared into full power, bathing the chamber in ethereal light, Patrick took a deep breath with a final glance back at the embattled facility. He stepped forward, leading his team into the unknown shimmering portal. Patrick felt a sudden tremor shake. The facility alarms blared and Zorthal's eyes widened with concern. "The portal's energy demand is destabilizing our defenses," the ancient being warned, his mental voice tinged with urgency. Patrick's comm crackled to life. "Sir, multiple breaches detected in the outer perimeter."
Marcus reported, his voice strained. "The Equilibrium Directive is launching a coordinated assault on all fronts." In that split second, Patrick made his decision: change of plans. He announced, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Aurora Nova, Marcus, proceed through the portal.
Captain Holt and I will remain here to reinforce our defenses." The team exchanged quick glances, understanding the gravity of the situation. Aurora nodded, her eyes glowing with dedication. "We won't let you down," she said, before stepping into the shimmering vortex. As Nova and Marcus followed, Patrick turned to Captain Holt. "Let's move," he ordered, already sprinting towards the command center. The facility shuddered under the renewed assault. Through the view screens, Patrick saw massive Equilibrium Directive war machines tearing through the evolving ecosystem. Fusion-powered behemoths crushed newly formed crystalline structures, their weapons cutting through their protective vines. Celeste, Patrick called over the comm, "We need those defensive turrets relocated. Focus on covering our weakest points." On it came.